Do you have a wonderful felt project, something like this, that needs sequins and beads applied? And you maybe have some questions about that. Well, we've got the answers for you, so stick around and we will show you exactly how to do this. We're going to attach our sequins with, each sequin is attached with a bead. And you can see here, I like to attach my sequins in a cupped shape so that they're kind of cupped, or a dish like a bowl up. They catch the most light that way, and they tend to be the most glittery and glistening. The next thing you need to do is to separate your beads and your sequins into containers that will keep them safe and separate. And I will show you here, this is the container that I have chosen that you can purchase. I will put a link in the description so that you can purchase this set of 12 containers. I like this because the containers come with a container to contain the containers. So that's the easiest way for me to work. Also, whatever containers you use, make sure that you get containers that have screwed down lids. I've tried snap down lids and other kinds of lids, and sequins and beads are flat or tiny, and they seem to find their way out of those containers. So I highly recommend screw down lids for your containers. And then when you open up your kit, you're going to dump one color of sequins into each container. You can label them like I have, because sometimes when I'm trying to go quickly, I can't tell which is gold, which is yellow, which is pink, which is lavender. So anyway, the larger containers I don't believe are available anymore, these identical ones, but you can find something similar, I'm sure. Those are how I keep everything separate, and it does help so much to be able to work your project with less frustration. I do frequently get asked to complete a project that someone has begun, and they've just become overwhelmed by the magnitude of the project. And when I receive it from them, sometimes I have seen sequins and beads in such a state. And then I know and I understand why the project was so overwhelming. So spend a few dollars, get yourself set up properly, and set yourself up for success so that you won't have that overwhelming feeling of having to hunt for the right bead, the right sequin. So we're going to work today. The next thing we're going to do is talk about the needles. The Bucilla kits all come with two needles, a bead needle and an embroidery needle. And you can see here that I keep my floss sorter labeled with my needles as well, so that I can grab and know that I'm grabbing the correct needle. So let me show you a bead needle and an embroidery needle. Hopefully you can see here that there are some differences. The bead needle is thinner. I think you can see that. And the embroidery needle is a little bit thicker. Also, as I bring them closer together, you can see that the bead needle is longer than the embroidery needle. I use my needles over and over, which of course needles are not throwaway, but you can see mine is a little bit bent, so I do sometimes bend them, especially those thin bead needles. So when you're going to apply your sequins, it's the bead needle that you need to thread up. And the eye of that needle is very, very narrow. So I thread it with just a single strand of floss. And then I'm going to pull the ends of the floss together and tie that into a knot, so that I have essentially made myself a double strand, because you always want to apply your sequins with a double strand of floss. So the first thing I do is I spill out. There's just too many beads in my big bead container, so I usually put a few into the lid, and that way if I have an accident and I knock something over, at least I'm only knocking over the small amount, not the huge amount. And then I get my sequins opened up and ready to go. And now here you can see that I have a single strand of floss, that's hard to say, single strand of floss, and I have pulled the two ends together and knotted them so that in essence I have a double strand of floss. That helps to keep your beads and your sequins secure. You're going to spend a significant amount of time putting these beads and sequins on your craft. You certainly don't want something to cause them to fall off. So give yourself that little insurance by using a double strand to help make sure that they're going to be more secure. Then when you're ready to actually put on your first sequin, you're going to take your needle and bring it up into the center of the dot that it indicates where to put a sequin. So I try to get it as centered as I can. And then I'm going to grab a sequin. I haven't pulled the needle all the way through. I get the tip of my finger moist either by licking it or using a sponge, which would be so much better, but I never think of it. And now I get that sequin on the needle and then hold it down, and then I can now pull it through till the knot catches and it's tight. And I do hang on to that right there, keep it where it's supposed to be. And I do apply it as a cup. As you can see here, if I flip it over, that you can certainly apply it the other direction. It will not catch quite as much light, but it still has some shine. And but I prefer them to be as shiny and sparkly as possible, so I use them in the cupped position. Now you're going to just use your needle and pick up one bead on that needle there. And if for some reason your needle does not go through your bead, number one, you might have the wrong needle. Number two, you might just have a faulty bead. And then I just take that bead off the needle and I throw it in the trash. There are beads that aren't perfect. And so once you get the bead on the needle, now you're going to go back through the hole in the center of the sequin and pull it tight. And you have just applied your first sequin, and you can see it's tight on the back and on the front. Now you're going to go to the next dot and do the same thing until you get down finished. Now I know that when my daughter was making a stocking, she called and said, "Hey, do I have to tie a knot at the end, at the back of each sequin before I can go to the next one?" And I said, absolutely not. You can do quite a few in sequence like this before you end up knotting off and running out of thread. So you can either knot off when you run out of thread, or you can knot off every 5 or 6. When I do a long series like these here at the top of this stocking, I do a single knot about every 5 or 6 sequins, because should they get tugged, I certainly don't want it to pull the whole strand off. I want there to be a stopping point so that it does have an easy repair. You can't see my stitches on the back there because it's a separate piece applied, but that's what I recommend and I suggest. I'm all about having these crafts that you spend so much time on lasting. So when I do sequins, like you can see these green sequins on this stocking that are just kind of spattered throughout the stocking, what I use as my rule is if it is farther away than the width of my thumb, then I'm not going to pull the strand of floss. I'm going to knot each one and do them individually. So that's what I've done on this stocking, because they were all far enough apart that I was not comfortable with dragging that floss across. And as you can see on the back of my stockings, all my stockings are lined, so the risk of tugging a strand and having a sequin come loose because of that is very, very minimal. But I still use that as my rule of thumb, so that things stay tight and your stocking and or whatever craft you're doing will be a long-lasting treasure for whomever it's gifted to. So let's go back to putting on a few more sequins here. Again, come up through the center as much as you can through that dot. Grab a sequin and put it down on, and I get to the point where I can feel if they're cupped up or down just when I pick them up. Hang on to it as you pull the thread through and pull it tight. Grab one little bead and go back down through the center of the sequin and pull that tight. And at the end of my series, or when I run out of thread for a series of sequins, I always double knot. But you can ask my kids, I'm a big double knotter. I want to tie once and, not come back and do the same thing again. So I'll get here to the end. I think this is the last one in this little series here. And we'll get that on the needle and hold that down, pull it through, grab a bead, go back through the center and pull it tight. And now we're just going to turn it over on the back side and give it its double knot. And I just take a small stitch kind of right exactly underneath that last sequin, right there, a tiny stitch. You can't even see it. And you're going to go through the loop and pull it tight. That makes your first knot. Then I'm going to do the same thing in as much of the same place as possible and do a second knot. And now I'm ready to snip off my thread, and I'm finished with that little area. As you can see, there's more to do on that piece. I'm kind of working ahead so I can show you how to do the sequins. But that's it. It's simple. Get organized. Make sure you've got the right needle that you're working with. Thread up only a single strand of floss, but tie the two ends together. Keep your sequins and your beads sorted and separated. You will have so much more success, and you just keep going until you get done to the end of your little project. And I just think the addition, sequins and beads are some of my favorite parts to do. So I know many people think I'm crazy, and in fact I am. I admit it freely. But I just think that the result of these beautiful sequins, and so many of them on a craft project, is just a lovely sight to behold. So I hope your day is very blessed, and I hope your project brings not only you great joy, but whomever it's for great joy, and puts a sparkle in their eye from all those sequins and beads.